And welcome everybody to TNM Coaching Unplugged podcast and Zoran Todorovic Interconnected podcast, the space where you elevate your heart, you elevate your soul, you elevate and expand your mind to the next level of itself, the space where you can really dive into the deeper conversation around personal development, coaching, evolution of humanity, and what is near and dear to your heart. And today I have special guest. I always have special guests, but this guest is really, really, really special. You know, sometimes people show up in your life and they're like these stars that just appeared out of the sky like a comet, and they just kind of dive into your life and they have this special energy around them. They're showing up as a catalyst, as evolutionary strategists, as people who are really passionate, compassionate, vulnerable, people who care about humanity, people who really, really want to see the betterment of the human species and human race, and they inspire you. So with this guest, I have been inspired many, many, many times. His humor is amazing. His intellect is really witty. He is extremely powerful in his business acumen. He has been very, very successful in his business dealing as well. He's an example of what is possible in humanity. Giancarlo Canavesio. I love this Canavesio. It's just, he's joining us today. So welcome, Giancarlo. Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. Oh my God, with this introduction, I'm a little bit afraid that I'm not going to be, keep up with expectation.
I know, I do this all the time to people. I do the trumpet and then people are saying, oh my God, can I really do this? But you can.
It's a technique.
Yeah, it is a technique. I just want to say a few more things about you and about Mangu TV, because you're founder and curator and selector in the Mangu TV. And every month, Mangu TV brings the new films, new podcasts, and all of these movies and podcasts are about sex, about plant medicine, about regeneration, about drugs. They're kind of controversial documentaries that you really want to share with humanity in order for us to kind of get something new, interesting, exciting, to really, really, really get us thinking. And I love that you have this courageousness around you, that you're able to produce, talk, highlight certain topics that not so many people are courageous enough to talk about. For example, your documentary in 2012, The Time of Change, Neurons of Nirvana, Understanding Psychedelics, Medicine, The Lottery of the Birth. That documentary in itself has made the top 10 list of the best social change documentaries, right? This was something breakthrough at that moment in time that nobody else talked about. And we're going to talk about more and more about other documentaries. But I just want to highlight how amazing it is that you are that human being who is strong, courageous, playful, crazy enough to be able to talk to us around this topic through the documentaries. So once again, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So with that journey, the first question that I have for you actually, what inspired you to kind of embark that journey of producing documentaries, watching documentaries, playing with that form? What was your journey into that medium, so to say?
So I was coming from finance. I was an investment banker in London in the 90s, and then I started a risk management company, and it was all about numbers. Mm-hmm. The way things look or feel or smell was completely out of the equation. So I felt that I felt a calling for filmmaking, for doing something more creative. I had a friend, Fabrizio, in New York, and we shot a short movie. Mm-hmm. Based on Truman Capote, Music of Chameleons. There was one episode, and he adapted that, and we shot in my loft in New York, and I was immediately hooked. Mm-hmm. Because there is something about playing God when you make a little short movie, because you can change the character, you can change the sex, you can change the age, you can change the location. You're like a mastermind, and usually people are very worry about having a movie crew in the loft, and I didn't want them to leave. So that was the electricity was incredible. And then I discovered documentary where you could add to the electricity of filmmaking, you can have the learning and if you want, the documenting, the activism, the reporting. I was always been passionate about news. Yeah, that's how it's all started.
So what I'm hearing, it was like playfulness because you love the media. Something really talked to you, that electricity of being able to, record something palpable and play God. But also you wanted to add this layer of education to it, that we can learn something new about ourselves and something new about the world through that medium, right?
Yes. And I met all this beautiful author when I arrived in New York at the end of the 90s. That completely opened my horizon to other paradigm, what you don't see. I was pretty much like a secular materialist, investment banker from London. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, when she was asking me, how do you, I'm going to really put me down now. she was saying, okay, but how do you feel, and then I remember that, I had a very even limited vocabulary on feelings, I'm tired, I'm hungry. That for me, arriving in New York and getting to know this author like Daniel Pinchbeck and was really an opening of metaphysical horizon. And so that curiosity combined with this new medium of camera, that was the beginning of Mangusta production.
Wonderful. So Mangusta production led into the Mango TV, and then in Mango TV, the films that you are, curating or sharing are, with the big topics. So let's say with the topics of sex, for example, you're talking about sex. How did you get into the space of wanting to co-create and produce documentaries that are actually inspiring people to look into their sexual life, into who they are, what they are, how they relate to it? Because again, this is a topic that is not comfortable for people to share and explore.
I mean, for Monogamish, the documentary on consensual non-monogamy, that was a very specific situation where one of my best friends, Tao Ruspoli, who's the director, he had, like me, a playboy father. I mean, his father was a famous playboy. Dado Ruspoli was dating the most beautiful star in the world. My father also was a playboy, a little bit less successful in terms of beauty but we both were a little bit traumatized because they were both practicing non-consensual non-monogamy. Tao's father was famous. He once invited two women on a holiday with him, one on the boat and one on a hotel in the islands. He was like in the Mediterranean, Capri, and so he would have a girlfriend on the boat, and then he would like leave her and then go and have dinner with the other girlfriend that was in the hotel somewhere. And my father once made us, we were like 8 or 9, he made us pretend to go skiing because we had to leave the house so that the girlfriend he had would leave the house. So we had to park the car with the boots and the ski and everything. And then he would go around the block, would say hi to this girl, and she would leave. We would go around the block and come back home, and then another girlfriend would arrive. And so me and Tao, we were like, when we heard about this movement in America called CNM, consensual non-monogamy, also ethical non-monogamy, we thought that makes more sense because we both saw the pain and misery that this constant lying created to our mothers and to other girlfriends, and it was just not sustainable. And so Tao decided to make a documentary. I raised some money, and he went on the road, and you guys should watch it on Mango.tv. Monogamish.
Absolutely, Monogamish, absolutely. Because again, what is beautiful and special about you is that you're sharing your life as well. You're sharing the beginning of the conception of that documentary that kind of created from the sheer space of you being able to transform certain energies of your father and what happened in your life, what was your model, into something that will make sense or feel right to you later on in your life. And I love when people come from inside out, when you use your own, let's call it pain, to be able to create something with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do people tell you when they watch this documentary? Do they get inspired by this? Do they get confused by the documentary? What is in the essence, the message that, it's there for people to be inspired to see?
So so the message is, it doesn't propose or push polyamory or non-monogamy. It's a very personal choice, but it is an attempt to show that this concept of monogamy, it's very recent, it's not working, and it's not natural. So it's very recent because it's only from the 60s that consensual, reciprocal monogamy, it's a very recent, because it's only with the woman liberation of the 60s that the woman imposed the men the same restriction. In the history of humankind, with patriarchy, men with the concubine, men has never been monogamous. They imposed monogamy on the woman to make sure that the son was theirs, the heir for the inheritance, for the land. So reciprocal monogamy is 50 years old, which is nothing in evolutionary terms. So it's very recent. It's not working. In America, 60% of marriages end up in divorce, and it's not natural. In his book Sex at Dawn, Christopher Ryan spent years studying all the species, and there is not one single species who's monogamous. People say, "Oh, but the penguin, the March of the Penguin, they make a movie, and the congregation would rent theater to show how monogamous they were." And they were, but for 1 year. They live 25 years, these penguins. So that's not exactly lifelong monogamy. And then the swan, they mate for life, but they have sex outside of the couple. So basically, there is not one species in nature. So it's very recent, it doesn't work, and it's not natural, but yet we take it as a default system. And even worse, we beat ourselves down if you're not good at it, and because of the Judeo-Christian morality. I mean, it's an old story on why we have this disagreement. So for me and Tao, it was important to tell the world, listen, if you choose monogamy, fine, but if it's not for you, don't feel bad about it, So that's a little bit the premise. I mean, it's very, very delicate, and everybody needs, you really need two Buddha people. I mean, the term polyamory is a bit misleading, because polyamory is when you love more than one person. Like you love two children, and that's really difficult. You really need two enlightened people that really have reached a level of awareness, and that has, what can be a little bit more feasible maybe is to have primary partner, and then you are allowed some flexibility that can be together, that can be separate, but where you are emotionally monogamous but sexually non-monogamous. That seems to be a little bit easier. To be emotionally non-monogamous and sexually non-monogamous, it seems to be very difficult. I know people, but it's very hard. We have 10,000 years of patriarchy. We have a very deep neurochemistry of love as property.
Yes.
And yes. sometimes in this commitment, as you're mine, you're mine, I'm yours, in that container, beautiful thing can flourish, and so it's really a personal journey, but culture needs to be more open, and it is like in my podcast you can hear Zana Branglova, the professor of sexuality at NYU, who talks about non-monogamy as a spectrum. Jorge Ferrer, another professor of sexuality, invented a term called novogamy, which is like, he thinks that like in gender, now there is depolarization, right? They talk about gender fluidity. He thinks that in the future, what's happening, there's going to be also a depolarization between monogamous and non-monogamous. There's going to be novogamous. And wow. Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. Check it out.
Absolutely. But what I'm loving again about this, and thank you so much for sharing that, is the conversation is open. When people kind of go beyond the taboo and they begin exploring what is right for them. You mentioned this is an individual process. You are in relationship with yourself, therefore you're in relationship with your sexuality. You need to explore to understand what really works for you. And you're also giving people permission for that exploration, because for me, this is boxed into the taboo. We always surrounded with this limited belief system, what we cannot do. We have guilt and shame as the main features within sexuality. So now here we can at least explore it. We can look into what feels right for us and what doesn't. And I love what you just said. It's recent phenomenon. No, let's not mention the pig in 1 year. I didn't know that.
and you know, one thing I want to add is like, you know, the sexual part of it. You know, I really believe that, you know, vitality and creativity are linked to sexuality. And, you know, in long-term monogamous couple, you know, after 20, 30 years, if one of the two lost interest in sexuality, what is the other person supposed to do, you know? So I feel that, you know, you know, I don't think there's any secret, but, you know, a lot of friends of mine, they completely remove sexuality from their life, you know, like old friends from Italy. I'm not going to say their names. They say, oh, you know, I just like, you know, they just, I said, but how do you deal with monogamy? And they say things like everybody else, with food.
Like everybody else with food. I love that.
But I think it's a mistake. I think you live longer if you're sexually active. I think you're like more creative, and so yeah.
There is the spiritual element as well of sexuality, the Kundalini rising, you know, the White Tantra, the people being able to tap into their powerful source of vitality, as you said, and therefore they can have more of everything in life instead of depriving themselves.
Exactly. And since you mentioned Tantra, so this is the other thing that I'm exploring now. We have two documentaries, one that I produced called Sex to Spirit, I executive produced, and another one, which is an old one called Sex Magic. They're both about Tantra. And so that's another alternative to long life monogamy, where instead of opening up, you go deeper with this person. So you don't do this peak orgasm anymore. You really use each other as a door to the divine and as a mystical experience. And that's something that can grow even after 20 years. Mm-hmm. So this is a little bit the two things I'm recommending for long-term monogamous. Either open up or go deeper with Tantra practices.
That's it. Open up and go deeper. Thank you, Giancarlo, for that. Now, tackling other extraordinary topics like understanding psychedelic and understanding the psychedelic medicine. For, you know, this is something new that nowadays is becoming a mainstream, so to say. A lot more people are knowing about it, but you're pioneering in that space of that understanding. So tell me more, how did you get into that space of understanding psychedelic, understanding the medicine? What was your journey in there? If you want to share a few personal things about that, because it's always inspiring for people to hear about real people, real life. And then, you know, how do you see the evolution of that going forward?
So my wife, Stephanie, she already was doing ayahuasca in her 20s, 30 years ago, when she was modeling in New York. She was going to Peru already back then. So when I met her in 06, 05, 06, she had a practice, and it was she was in and out. She had a practice and also party practice, and so she organized for me a ceremony in a peniche, in a houseboat in Paris, with some friends of her, with this shaman from Peru. And that was my first time, and it was incredible. I remember having an incredible heart opening and synesthesia, mixes of senses, and I realized that we were just scratching the surface. And so it was a beautiful period. We, you know, together we decided that, you know, we wanted to do this, we wanted to be together. And so we started a practice. You know, we had a little bit of issue to address, both of us, some little addictions here and there. And together we did it, you know, like from 06, maybe for 6-7 years, until maybe, maybe until 2012, 2013, we would go to Alto Paraíso in Brazil, and we would get to at least a couple of retreats per year. And, you know, we did hundreds of ayahuasca ceremonies. And you know, like, you're never 100% healed, but we feel now we are healed enough. And
you're healed enough, that's good.
and so now we don't have a practice anymore. We do it once in a while, more as a collective experience. So that was the beginning. And then again, Daniel Pinchbeck, when I arrived in New York, you know, had wrote a book called Breaking Open the Head. and on contemporary shamanism, and so through him and we met a lot of psychedelic, psychonaut in New York. I become friends with Rick Doblin at MAPS. We become very close with Amanda Fielding at Beckley and Roland Griffith at John Hopkins, and I started to help also donating for some clinical trial, and that was the beginning, and then the documentary, and then
for the people who are kind of at the beginning of this journey and trying to understand the deeper purpose and deeper meaning, of engagement, because you shared right now, you engaged spontaneously through your wonderful wife who was already there, and you begin exploring and healing and transforming. What would you say are the most beneficial things that you have experienced in your life as a result of engaging in the ceremonial space or understanding the psychedelic medicine?
We had a specific issue to address, which were addictions, and so for your listener that are new to this, I would recommend one book, which is the Michael Pollan book, Breaking. I feel like saying.
Say whatever comes to you, and then we'll reference it in the.
Michael Pollan, something like The Science of Psychedelic, How to Open Your Mind, something like that. If people Google Michael Pollan psychedelic, is a bestseller. And Michael Pollan, he did all his research as he usually does, and with this new magnetic resonance machine called functioning, fMRI, you can see what's happening in the brain when you take these psychedelics. So DMT, psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, and what's happening is there is a default mode network in the brain, which is the connection of three key areas: the prefrontal cortex, the medium cortex, the thalamus, something like that. And it's a hub for different areas of the brain. And Michael Pollan says that is the closest thing to your egoic armor. It's like the director of the orchestra of your brain. That basically what happened when you take the psychedelics, this default mode network gets subdued because it reduced the blood supply. The psychedelics it's a little bit counterintuitive. The psychedelics reduce the blood supply in this default mode network. So it's like your ego gets subdued. So now that the ego is not driving you anymore, you are allowed to go behind your personality, your biography, and you can tap to all the other part of your brain that were subdued. I explained to my 10-year-old son this idea of the orchestra in the brain, and then he said, "Oh yes, of course," because then the director fall asleep, all the other head of the other department fall asleep, and then it's pillow fight everywhere.
Exactly.
and it's right. The creativity, the patience, the curiosity, all these things that were subdued by the director of the orchestra and then the head of the other department of the brain. Now that they're gone, is a total anarchy. It's like those snowball, where this kitsch little table snowball that you shake and all the snow goes up in the air. So basically, you in that moment of anarchy, you can make new connection, and you can, and so you understand why you have this desire of numbing. You see behind the structure of your egoic brain. It's very interesting. I recommend the book, absolutely.
And did it help you deal with your addictions? Because I know everybody's struggling with some kind of addiction, being a food, alcohol, tobacco, addiction to social media, addiction to, television. We all have this in our
absolutely
addictive behavior. So that journey, how did it help you, and to what extent were you able to free yourself from addiction?
So during the ceremony itself, sometimes it's complicated. It can be a little bit disorienting, but in the morning, it's what they call the psychedelic glow. And for a few hours, and then if you keep it with diet and yoga and the right thinking, you can keep it for a few weeks, even the psychedelic glow. You have that sense of peace. I used to say that I just don't have a a voice in my brain. I have a committee of people commenting everything I do. This is good, this is bad, why you did that? And then they talk about themselves, you know. And the mind can be you know, they say that, you know, the mind is a great servant, but there's a terrible master. And I was completely enslaved by my mind. And then I needed to numb it with substance and other behavior. But with psychedelics, I found this peace. So even if it doesn't guarantee it, then you have to do the work. You know, you have to organize your life, finding purpose, organize your daily, you know, your routine, and it's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet that you just take once. You have to do the work, but it gives you this sense that peace is possible. Right. And then every 3 months you will go back, and then you will go deeper, and you will understand things about yourself. And then you have to, you know, what really helped me actually is coaching. You know, I told you, I signed up to with this coach, and she really helped in setting the goals and the purpose. That's why I think that, you know, to really have a successful or fulfilling or happy life, I think it's a combination of psychotherapy and coaching. You know, that's
for integration, because you're also saying that integration is most important. And I love that you're sharing that, because there's no this spiritual bypassing when we take the magic pill and immediately everything transforms in our life. We all want that. You know, we're aware of our ability to be instantaneously creating reality. And I'm sure eventually we will be in a situation when we can just dream it in a second and transform ourselves. But we're not there yet. So, you know, we are seeking for that speed in transformation. But I love what you're sharing with the audience, that this is a journey when you're taking the steps, but then you're going back into your life, and in your life, you're actually practicing and integrating and setting the goals and creating routines and everything. And then, you know, you can slowly begin unfolding. And I love what you said as well, which I 100% agree, that this is never done, that we all work in progress, and it keeps on, you know, fluctuating, and keep on working and growing with this, instead of feeling, okay, now I'm done, let me move to something else, right?
Yeah.
And that this kind of brings us to the next topic that I love that you're addressing right now through your work, which is the regeneration. You know, regeneration of humanity, regeneration of the soil, regeneration of our planet, regeneration of, you know, the climate. You know, how did you get into that? You know, what kind of got you to become passionate about that part?
So when we bought this land in Ibiza 7 years ago, my brother had used this permaculture gardener, and he told me, listen, you know, he's very knowledgeable, but you know, he does what he wants. But so I was curious. So I met with Josean, and I said, Josean, listen, I show him the land. I said, I bought this land, let me build a house, and then we do the vegetable garden. And he was like, no. You don't make the mistake everybody makes. You start the garden today. And I was like, but we have to ask for the permit. It's going to take years and years. And I said, listen, to prepare this land, we need at least 3-4 years. I was like, oh my God. And so through him, I learned that, you know, it's this idea of regeneration of the land is like creating underground a symphony of chemicals. Basically, and you do this avoiding pesticide and fertilizer. So you need to create a biodiverse ecosystem of plants, trees, and vegetables that can actually help each other with mycelium, with this fungi that help the communication, with animal manure, with compost. You have to take the big stones out. And Josean explained to you that the consequence of this biodiversity symphony is not only that you have a resilient farm that doesn't need pesticide and fertilizer, but you have all the macronutrients that otherwise will be destroyed by the monoculture. And people don't know that yet. It's quite recent science. You know, people think the gut is the second brain. But what now we're discovering with electronic microscope is that it might be the first brain. The level of complexity of the macrobiota is like trillion of quadrillion of bacteria and microorganisms. It's like 10 with 32 zero. There's like 10 times more than all the stars in the sky. It's incredible number of complexity. And so what happened is that this microorganism that comes from the regenerated soil through the produce, then feed your microbiota and boost your autoimmune system. It's not a coincidence that in America, that is such a huge industrial agriculture, there is like epidemic of everything, of obesity and heart disease and diabetes. And it's like in America, there's like great mental health. It's because people don't eat food anymore. This idea that food is medicine is now coming, into the mainstream. But until a few years ago, I think that doctor in residence didn't even have to take a course in nutrition.
Right.
So we now with some friends, we are, in Ibiza, it's a perfect storm because there is so many abandoned land. I think only there's like in this island, there's like 500,000 hectares of land. Only 1% is farmed regeneratively, and only 2% of the food eaten in this island is produced here. And there's all this land that has been underused or abandoned. So it's a huge opportunity for all these talented and resourceful people in this island to make this island an example of the world, for the world. If you can regenerate 50,000, 100,000 hectares, you can capture the rainwater, you can change the biosphere, you can avoid the 40-degree temperature in August, you can feed the population with nutritious food. Maybe in 20, 30 years, we're going to have Ibiza to be a blue zone when there is the most 100-years-old people living in Ibiza,
Yeah. But what you're saying is that is something that is extremely important for us to get in relationship with right now. I think that now is the time for us to really wake up into the sense of the food is our medicine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Move away from
processed food
into really understanding that, what we put inside of ourselves is, it's so important. And, to eliminate the sickness and disease, because a lot of that was created by industrial production of the food.
Correct.
On Giancarlo's Mangu.tv website, you will be having a privilege to go to different sections that we kind of discussed. Today you have a section on drugs, and then you have section of the documentaries there. Then you have section on sex, and you have the selection of documentaries there. And then you also have a regeneration section when you have different documentaries to see there. And then also every month, there is a pick of the month and the most popular ones, so the feature film. I keep on saying to people, we're so tired of Netflixing and going to HBO and going to the Amazon Prime and just watching these endless streams of series that sometimes is super inspiring and refreshing to kind of go into the space when you can find this beautiful documentary that can really get you to think, open up your perception, get you to explore different versions of yourself, and really get you to learn something. Because by me watching some of the documentaries of this production, I've really learned about myself and about life. So now, one last thing that we have before we wrap up for you. I know that you're big on the topic of understanding your own trauma to be able to transform. And part of the people who are listening to this podcast, they're in personal development. They come from big organizations. They come from personal development industry. There are also people who are coaches, teachers, therapists, and guides as well, and people who are curious about personal development. And we had this conversation once, you and I, on the life, when you just stepped into the life transmission, you talked about importance of trauma and why we need to look into this and how can we liberate ourselves from it and what is that. So I would just like you to talk about it a little bit because I like your take on it as well.
So a good framework that I resonate with is what Gabriel Mate talk about. Gabor says that as humans, we have two basic needs, which is the need for attachment and a need for authenticity. Because evolutionarily, if the need of attachment is obvious, we need, when we're born, we need another year and a half before we're able to be independent and walk around. We're not like a horse that day one can run away. So we need attachment to our mother. And the authenticity is because, evolutionary in the savannah, we needed to trust our instinct to avoid to be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. Gabor says that sometimes in the West, in our society, what happens is that, we lose attachment because our parents are just distracted because they have their own problem, nothing to do with, nothing wrong with us. And as a consequence of that detachment, we lose the authenticity because we want to get this interest back. I mean, that's definitely happening with my father, for example. I lost my sense of authenticity because I wanted to get his attention back. So I pretended to be what he wanted me to be. And so that, Gabor says, create like a neurocircuitry rupture. That loss of authenticity is like a rupture that prevents your evolution, and that create this traumatic, like a knot, like a psychological knot. And when your brain is like, very porous, like age 4, 5, 6, 7, you internalize fears on, how that there's something wrong with you. Your parents not showing up to the recital at school is not because they were busy at work, but they don't love you. So as a kid, we go through all these events that make us doubt. When we are kid, we cannot process it. We just internalize them. But then they are there, and they are. It's like a neurocircuitry resistance that make us lose. Which create an issue with self-esteem, which makes you think that we're not lovable, and that's the traumatic event. And then, of course, if you have an abusive father that wipe you with the belt, then you remember. But there's a lot of also more subtle trauma that are very pernicious. Just lack of being positive reinforced, lack of encouragement, lack of presence, emotional neglect, unemotionally available parents. All this stuff in childhood make you build your armor. And then you hear people saying, "Oh, that's just my personality, just my neuroses. People don't change." But it's not true. We now know from neuroplasticity, from neuroscience, that you can rewire your brain. It just takes a long time. It takes a long time, and it takes a lot of effort. So sometimes it's easier, to numb. You have that anger, that reactivity, that trigger that comes out when certain things happen. But rather than make the effort to understand that that's not a response, that's a reaction, that's a trigger to this and this and that, it's easier to have a whiskey or other numbing.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit the big problem, I think, in our society. And then people are so busy. People are so busy. People are so tired from work, and it's almost. I hear, I have good friends that are so busy. I say, listen, I don't have time for your documentary. My brain I'm fried at night. I'm cooked. I don't have the energy to understand about the brain and the consciousness and the traumatic event, and I just want the Netflix to just relax, and because people, I'm reading a book now that my friend recommended called 4,000 Week, which is basically 4,000 Week is the average age that we live. It's not very much, right? 4,000 weeks. Anyhow, and so it's a book on time management, basically saying that is that we don't have time. We are time. So basically, the idea is that you're not going to be able to optimize your time to do everything that you want to do. It's just an illusion. Basically, the idea is that you have to learn to say no, not just to the things you're not sure you like, but you have to learn to say no even to the things you like, in order to allow for space for the things you really like. And of course, I'm lucky. I was lucky in the 90s in finance in London. Even monkeys would make money. So of course I have the luxury to be able to take time off. But Warren Buffett says that in order to have a happy life, you have to write down your 25 objectives in life and then scratch the last 20. What I'm trying to say is that people are just doing too much.
Absolutely, they're doing too much, and also this conversation about trauma and how they feed trauma and not being able to be fully authentic through the space of not really feeling that attachment in a genuine way, we don't have time to deal with this. And that just keeps on escalating and driving people's life without us having space and time to evolve. So what we're saying to the audience right now, create space, right? Stop being that busy.
Yes.
Make sure that you create a little pocket so in your life, in your time, and you can address certain things in your life that those traumas will bring into your presence, and don't neglect them. And I think that if we are wise enough to make sure that we are in relationship to what triggers us, what is our innate trauma or the micro traumas that you were talking about, and we address one by one, we tackle them, we transform them, we understand them, then we step into a completely different level of our life, which is more contentment, peace, fulfillment, joy, right?
Yes, absolutely. And then I don't know if we have a couple of more minutes, I really like Brené Brown. She talks about her book, Daring Greatly. She says that, a lot of people are just so uncomfortable with being vulnerable. They just don't like it because, again, from their insecurity and sense of shame, this idea of like putting themselves in a vulnerable position, they don't like it. But then this is a recipe for lack of growth. Like Brené says, you have to put yourself down in the arena. And then if you fail, is new data. There's no failing. There's just like learning. Yeah. And I have friends that are terrified of putting themselves out there. And that's a pity. So I would say, embrace the vulnerability and don't be ashamed of failing. Failing is very important. It's just new data. There's no losing. There's just winning or learning.
Using absolutely or practice and play, because we all invited here to play. But in order for us to be playful, we also need to be in relationship with ourselves. So what I love about your expansive self is that you are bringing all the elements that we need to be in relationship with to be the best possible version of ourselves. This is clearly featured on Mangu.tv. So Giancarlo, one last word of wisdom to leave our audience with.
So there's another book that I really think is very important. It's called Lost Connection, Joan Hari. And it basically he's been suffering from depression all his life, and he tried the SSRI, and he went on a long journey to study all the clinical trial from the pharmaceutical company on this SSRI, on this these prescription drugs that basically close artificially your synapses so your serotonin stay in the air. And it basically realized that the data are really discouraging, that there is a lot of side effect. Anyway, he thinks that the real secret to beat depression or depressive episode, people say, oh, I'm not depressed, but every 2-3 months I have a week in bed, so that's also it's a depressive episode. It's connection, it's community and connection. So the quality of that's why I love Ibiza so much, because people really care about the connection with the community here. They give a lot, and the quality of your connection is very important. That's the last advice I have.
So I have to say that you not only lived to your introduction, but you have exceeded your introduction. The amount of information we shared today will take few listeners to listen in 2 times, because we open up big topics and we gave the essence of each and every topic just for you to enjoy and to elevate. Thank you so much for coming and being with us today. All the information about Giancarlo's projects and the Mangu TV is going to be referenced in the video below, also on the podcast. And we're going to also offer the Instagram pages for the Mangu TV so you can follow them. It's beautiful curation there to inspire you to be more connected, to be more yourself, to explore parts of you that sometimes we feel a little bit shy or incompetent or not so courageous to explore. So once again, Giancarlo, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for coming, and we cannot wait to have you once again on this podcast.
Thank you very much, Zoran. Thank you very much.